Good morning. Saturday morning conversation with authors. Thank you for joining us. This is Lisa Marie Garcia. I am part of the publishing team called Now Publishing. Just mentioning to someone that this month, September, which is almost over, right, marks our 8th year publishing books for clients, bringing their stories into the world. So very excited to be here. I'll go ahead and go on stream as you join us here. And let's see, and I actually have my author with me as well. So I want to introduce our author. Very excited today to have a different type of discussion with an author because this author, Dr. Bruce Campagna, is a fiction book author. So let me read a little bit about read you his bio. And good morning, Bruce. We should say
Good
first
morning, Lisa. How are you?
How are you?
Good, thanks. Good to see you.
I'm great. Thank you. So I want to just share. Thank you. I want to share with the writers that you were born in Boston. You now live in St. Paul, Minnesota. You're a very smart guy. I know I might be embarrassing you a bit, but you hold a BS degree in engineering, an MBA, and you have your PhD in health. Had it for several years. Something people should know about you is you've traveled extensively through America and actually outside of the U.S. You're what is it called? Girl dad. You're father of 3 girls. You're avid hiker, and your life's mission, at least for as long as I've known you and before that, when you came to work with us, is being the co-founder of your not-for-profit One for Health Foundation, which brings nutrition and yoga classes to underserved kids in the community across the country. I love that. There's so much more about you, but I loved this idea. I'd like to present this, that when you're not stressing out over your next novel, because we're going to talk about your fiction series books, you love to hike mountains and play the piano, and of course visit your daughters and your grandchildren that live in Boston and Seattle, 2 of my most favorite cities in the U.S. So welcome to the show, Bruce, and thank you for being here. And I hope that you and everyone else that's watching us, and I'm going to say welcome to all those that are on the stream right now. I hope you've had your caffeine so we can kind of dig in here to our conversations with authors. It's going to go by fast. It'll be a nice 30 minutes. So thank you for being here first. It's nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Lisa. Thanks. Happy to be here.
All right. So I haven't set up your book series, but the first book that you published is called Quest of the Chosen. And then the second book that you've published is called Other Light. And I'd love you to tell about the Light Passers Chronicles book series, and that you've got book 1 and book 2, and just tell anyone that has met you for the first time, people listening to you for the first time, what this series is about, what's the purpose of it, and what has transpired in book 1 and 2, in somewhat of a high format, and then we'll dig into some of the special parts that I personally have read and love.
Okay, right, I'll give it a go. So it all started out with me I like to write, and I've never really written a book or anything, but I've done writing here and there. So I wanted to write a story that encapsulated kids primarily as the focal point because of One for Health Foundation and my work in there and helping kids. So I set out to do one that's with diverse characters, and I chose 4 around the world: a Lakota Sioux girl, a Black boy from Detroit, a Palestinian girl named Leah, and Kylie, who's from Hong Kong. So that was the essence of it, to try to get them in the first book to meet in some kind of strange way. And it's more of a fantasy, but still an adventure story with danger and all that, and have them help each other to learn about each other, learn about the cultures, and grow that way. So that was the sort of the foundational book. It took me like 10 years to write because I was working at the time, and also trying to figure out how to market stuff and all that. So that's when Lisa and I sort of got together, and I was working on that book, and that led to really the second book, which is called Other Light, which takes them from this sort of otherworldly kind of thing and into the real world. And this particular situation is in Jerusalem during Passover and Easter and Ramadan, the 3 major religions and their focal points for that season. And it happened to coincide, particularly this year, all the same week, all the same day, actually. So I used that as a background, and it's a mystery about how Leah, uh, her brother gets kidnapped by terrorists, and that's the plot of the story ostensibly. But then it really turns into a situation where there's conflict in the Middle East, as you know. It's focused on Jerusalem, and Leah is from Gaza Strip in Palestine. That's where she lives, and where the story takes mostly place, and there and in the city, old city of Jerusalem. So it's an adventure story, and this way it's a little bit different. It's a little bit less fantasy, but some to keep that element going. And it brings in more adults. It brings in a lot of adult themes, but it still keeps that sort of essence of clean. There's not like a whole lot of sex, and there's no sex in these books. There's not a lot of murders. I mean, in terms of it's not the typical American shoot 'em up kind of thing. But it is dangerous at times. It is exciting, and it's an adventure story and a mystery. And so, because it doesn't have some of those other elements, it's liked from YA all the way through adults. And that's the aim for the book series called Light Passers Chronicles. And it's called Light Passers Chronicles because the kids discover the light within themselves as they in the book one, where they learn about things and what is important to them and in life and to each other. And then it's their mission becomes to pass out light to everybody across the globe. And the second one just happens to pull them into this situation, and they all get into it. Leah's the main focal point, but it's really exciting as technological elements, and I bring my physics involved in my engineering and all this kind of stuff, and so it's a little bit larger book, not that much larger, and in terms of pages, but it maintains that sort of adventure, mystery, and excitement while trying to impart some sort of values, or not necessarily my own personal value system, but the learning and what's important for people to learn about themselves and others. So that's why it's called Other Light.
Excellent description. Let's stay on the fact and just reiterate what the genre is. So the genre is targeted primarily at the YA, young adult fiction adventure book, and as you said, but however, it's a wonderfully written suspense suspense generated page turner. I mean, honestly can say that because I've read the first book, and I remember my remarks, and it's been over a year probably, but I remember my remarks saying, I felt like I remember a scene now where it was in a flowing river that was very dangerous to cross over. And I think I remember that, your characters were clinging to each other, clinging to trees. And I felt like I was right there. Right. So if you have that experience when you're in a book, it's very well written. You put yourself into the characters because of how well written and suspenseful that you made your book. So, you mentioned those elements aren't in there, of drug, sex, whatever it is. They don't need to be, that just that has, they don't need to be. And it doesn't, so I'm not saying this very articulately, but you do have a very artful way of building that fiction story that is very compelling. So congratulations to you, because I know it doesn't come easily. We're going to talk about that, and I know it takes a dig in. I want to talk through that with you. So again, first, the idea of knowing that a fiction book is 360 degrees different than a nonfiction book. And I can say that because it is what I know, as we primarily produce and publish, as work with authors that are nonfiction. Right. It's a complete different ballgame. So I would like you to talk about one of the elements of that. There's many that are different, but one of the elements of it with fiction books like you have is that element of research and all of that. And can you just talk to that, because it's pretty astounding from what I know you've done and what I've heard other fiction writers need to do in terms of the research to even begin to write the books that they write.
Right. It's a big part of what I have to do up front. And so I spend a couple of months, 2 or 3 months of thinking initially about the storyline and everything, but then starting to research elements of what might be in the book. And it might be cities, it might be technology, it could be, the sort of spiritual flavor of the book, or the people that are going to be in the book and that type of thing. So I have to get into all that, and that does take a lot of time to do. And one of the things I like to think of as a strength that I do have is that I can take a lot of information and synthesize it and reduce it to something that's more understandable, and then try to write it in a way that it's not, repelling to people. They can learn and use this stuff in part of the storyline. So that is a huge part. And some of the research that I do in that involves a lot of this from my travel. I've traveled all over the world. I've seen these places. I've seen Hong Kong. I've been to the Middle East and lived there for a while. So I have a certain knowledge of some of these things, which helps. But a lot of it, I really have to dig up and learn. I didn't know the spiritualities deeply, you know, and some of the cities, the backgrounds of the cultures, I had to research, and some of the other elements in the book. So, but some of it is, for instance, in Hong Kong. I'd been there, but briefly, and but I knew about where I wanted to be. But I actually used Google Earth to go down on the streets, to walk around and do that. In the second
Nice.
book, yeah, it's cool. And then in the second book, I used the same sort of thing to look at Jerusalem in the old city, where you can go to the cathedrals, and you can go into the mosque. You can go in and see around, and you can really get a feel for what it must be like to be there in the crowds and things like this. So that's a sort of adds to what the element of the book. And all through then, after I do that, I do a storyline, and then I try to stick to some version of that as I go along. It changes, as you know, and but it does try to follow a certain line or lines. And then I have to keep doing the research as I go, because things pop up, in the second and other lights. They're having dinner at a restaurant that's on, the Red Sea, and and on the Mediterranean Sea. And I have to find a restaurant that I think meets that criteria for me during that time. So I do the research for that. And so you can see it sort of winds around, and I add more technology into it. It's kind of an odd process, as writing always is, and it can be frustrating at times. But I like that part of it. I like the learning. I like, the investigation, and that kind of, that's a mystery to me. So yeah.
Right. So one of the questions, as I was thinking about your book, is because you have that experience with your not-for-profit in the YA and the young adult area, and you've been working that. How many years have you been working with that as a founder of
The
that, a
foundation,
co-founder of the
about
foundation?
about 12 years. I started it shortly before I started, a year or two before I started actually writing the first book. And the first book was just a lot of just time involved in learning how to write. As you know, as we worked together at the time,
Right.
I
Right.
wasn't a professional writer, and I had to work with the editors and the development editors and the regular editors, and get through
Right.
that process in the first book. That's why it probably took me so long. And then as I got the feel of it, then I, sort of settled in. And the second book, Other Light, only took a year and a half. So that's short. I shortened that. And this next book that I've
Right.
started, it hopefully it'll be a year. So maybe next summer.
Fantastic. The third book of, are you still on track for 5 books in the
I am.
White Pastors Chronicle series? I love
Yes,
that.
I am. And because
Congratulations. I
each
mean,
one,
that's huge.
for your
Perfect.
audience, the first book is sort of like The Hobbit. It sets the tone of the relationships and that kind
Yeah.
of thing, what the message or mission might be. And then the next four, one is in each of the hometowns of the main characters, and then they bring in other characters and adults and all that kind of stuff. That's the idea.
I'm just typing in the chat, the Light Pastors Chronicles, and I have to spell Chronicles correctly without full caffeine this morning. There you go. But so one of the questions I have, since you have that 12-year experience in the YA area, living and breathing it through the foundation, and then now writing for it,
Right.
what would you say you've seen as a difference between that age group and the 12 years, and then the other part of that is, and I'm in this mode right now because I have I have a 17 and an 18 and a half year old daughter, 2 daughters. What have you seen as what this generation now needs what are they craving? What do you think this generation needs, or that might be
You know,
different than 12 years
okay,
ago?
right. Thanks for the questions. Good question. I think that kids of all generations kind of need meaning in their life. They need relationships. They need something that makes life bigger than what they seem to be living. I think we all went through that. We all go through that. One thing I did learn, because I had three girls and I watched them grow and learn from them. But kids these days are they're very facile at looking things up and learning things and all that. Um, they really need they want something more, so and I think they're capable of knowing and understanding more than we ever could, and so they're not afraid of the topics, and they're not shelter they don't want to shelter themselves. They can handle the topics that I give them. The topics are not mean topics or anger. It's really about relationships and about what's meaningful in life and all that, and they can handle it. And the murder, the mystery, and all that. They're smarter than we give them credit for. I think every generation probably is. But I see that because I have a 12-year-old that lives next to my daughter, one of my daughters out in Seattle, and he loved the first book, and he really was a fan of mine, which was great for me because I said, okay, I can hit that age. And I saw him last year when I came over other late. He sat down. It was a much more complex book than the first book. It's more intrigue. It's more connectedness of things. It's really a little heavier read, but still capable. And he's like 14 in that then, and then but he thought it was even better. He thought than the first book, if that could be. And he said he took him 3 days. He went from start to finish to read the book because he loved it so much. So that to me is what is meaningful to that age group. They can handle it. He's only 12 or 14 years old, but it also has the same meanings for adults. That's why you can look into it and see the same things, and we've forgotten some of those things. So the kids remind us, and I think that the kids are the future, of course, and they're struggling. They're
Right.
struggling with their health. They're struggling with the learning now with the school systems and the stress and all that kind of stuff. It's awful, and this is a redeeming way to look at life and for them and sort of get a different handle on things and encourage themselves and encourage others and join in this quote mission that I'm trying to create of passing the light. And so get them involved to try to pass that. And then, but I have found because adults like the book too. I have almost all 5-star ratings on both books, and so it's
Yes.
and for me it's the mission. Even the writing now, I want to do these books. I'm going to do these books. I like to write, as stressful as it really is at times, and I think sometimes I've lost my mind, or that I can't write at all. And so yeah, go through that. Everybody goes through that. But the meaning for me is the mission and trying to get people involved in this mission. So we have a marketplace on the website which sell T-shirts with sayings: "Pass the light for this, for love, for forgiveness, for compassion," things like that they can get involved with and they can pass it. And I'm trying to find out more ways to do that more effectively, and to use that also to market the books as well. Still, but the
Well,
kids, yeah, your question, kids are great. They can handle anything.
I love it. So it's such encouragement, not the negative that you tend to hear somewhat these days. But you're passing the light because, and congratulations to you in terms of doing it. We were talking this last Thursday on a LinkedIn audio about, 1,000 people that want to write a book. 30 of them actually do it. Of those 36, and this was a pretty recent stat and study, 6 of them actually do it. So, you're part of that 6 of a
That's good.
thousand. And yeah, and again, it's not easy. But as I say to my daughters all the time, anything fantastic, anything great, anything above ordinary is not easy. That's
No,
why, it's that way. If it was easy, everyone would do it and all of that. But I love what you've talked on, and I want to hit this point because first of all, you said adults enjoy it. I absolutely did. It's a great read, and I'm not necessarily a fiction book reader. I
I
like to
remember
read.
that.
biographies. That's right. And I absolutely did. I read it from cover to cover in a short period of time. So definitely, even though it does, hit the primary market of YA, the secondary niche 100% is adults. But I'd also want to circle back, and then we want to move to another subject about how you do leave religion out. It is not a preachy book, even though there are key values of wisdom and the light, right? So the light
Right.
/ in my mind, called wisdom. It's the wisdom that adults, young people, everyone in this world is looking for. What is the right choice? What is the right decision? What
Right.
is the wise thing to do? What is the best thing for everyone to do for themselves? I search for that every day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love
I
that your
agree.
books, take kind of, show, I think the journey, at least from the first book, as you start to impart wisdom, just almost in a backdoor way, so it's just the little nudge, right? The little
Yeah,
nudge,
I
the little
appreciate
guidance.
that
I love that.
observation because my whole tact was, first of all, I'm a white old guy, and the question is, how can you write these different ethnic kids and
Diversities.
stories and be and I always say, hey, I'm not trying to be them. I'm just trying to. They tell me who they are. I'm not them, but in the process of that and really learning about these topics that you're talking about, I tried to do in a way that isn't preachy. Certainly, an author, some of the feelings he has or thoughts come through, and some of my backgrounds come through, but not obviously. And I try to do it through campfire talks to the kids. They're learning something. They see a letter, they learn something, they question it. There's something else in the background saying something that they're having it in dreams, and then they talk about it, in a way that's sort of natural, and it doesn't really. I'm not trying to, give them the Ten Commandments, but
Right.
uh, you know, but I'm
But there
trying
is
to.
something to those values,
Well, that's the case,
right?
that's exactly
Yeah.
right, because that's
Right.
common. Those things, those thoughts of compassion and love and forgiveness, those are
Right.
common throughout spiritualities. And so I try to stay away from religion, even though, of course, Jerusalem is one of the most religious places in the whole world, and
Right.
very important to Christianity and the other religions. So that comes through in that sense, but in a different way, where it's really the core values there that we're talking about. It has nothing to do with the rituals or the different things that people do in cross religions. So that's that commonality in humanity that I'm trying to pull out and make people feel comfortable about.
You definitely do that. I want to ask you, as I ask you a question, I want to show the other light. The quest continues. This is book 2 of the 5 books. The first one is called Quest of the Chosen, book 1 in the Light Pastor's Chronicles. And we'll talk about it again, but you can look this up and get his books. Are sold everywhere books are sold, primarily, of course, Amazon, that we all usually go to first. I want you, as we're getting towards the end of our conversation, I want you to speak to that fatigue, right? That writer's fatigue, the author fatigue that comes in, and how did you, especially in a very complex, we'll say, fiction book, as you're writing it, how would you encourage someone that's watching today and maybe they've gotten fatigue as they're starting their book or in the middle of the book? Maybe they're in year 10 of writing a book. Trust me, we've met with authors that have been working on a book for 30 years
Yeah,
sometimes. Could you speak to that and just
yeah.
maybe give some tips or just offer what your solution was and how you dealt
I
with that?
think my solution was kind of by doing a format and sort of outline storyboard thing in the beginning. It keeps me online to what I'm trying to do, because otherwise you get buried in the beginning and it's like terrible. And so I try to figure that out. But really, I learned that I have to set aside time, and I set aside. I get up early, so I try to set aside between like 7 in the morning and 5 at noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon to do the writing, to stay there and be isolated and not do anything else, because you'll have to run the One for Health Foundation. So I do that in the afternoon, and my partner Elizabeth, she helps me with all the marketing and stuff like this in the afternoons of the books and other things that we're doing. And she also encourages me, so which is a big part of me staying on target. But a lot of it is setting aside the time and just doing it. And she's an artist, and she knows that there's a process she tells me to go through, and she knows my process. She sees me walk around the house, and she says, "Go downstairs, go down into your cave, and walk around down there." And so that kind of thing until I settle. I may send some emails. I might do something just to get started. I might read something, but then eventually you started. Then it's painful because you don't even want to read what you wrote yesterday. It's like, oh God, I don't want to do that. And so it's just sort of just putting one foot in front of the others and just, sort of, okay, here we go. Let's just do it. And then once you get in, and if you're trying to do something, and of course, every author wants to do something meaningful to some degree or storyline. And then once you start to get that going, I think it takes on its own sort of course, and you sort of get through it. But this is also periods of where you do massive editing. You go, I had to take a character out of the book, and that's like they call that killing babies, killing your babies, because you've created them, and all of a sudden now you got to wait a minute. And so those processes are really hard, and it is this up and down thing. But you just have to believe that you can do it and get through it. And like you said earlier, in the end, it's the accomplishment of doing it, and hopefully it's meaningful to somebody. That's, and then you move on from there.
Great encouragement. Saying you isolate yourself, you stay there. This is your time to get into the book and continue moving the book forward in whatever way. It's 100% great tips. And like you said, you've got scheduled time. We
Right.
call that a BIC, butt and chair time. And you sit there, and really we tell our authors when they're struggling with this is just sit there. And if you don't want to write, fine, but stay there, stay isolated. Yep. And Google book covers and Google people that you want to emulate that are, killing it in your genre. Just do book related items. And like you said, eventually it might take a while. I used to run, and it would always, the first 20 minutes of my run, I hated running. I'm like, why am I here?
Exactly the same process.
This. I'm going to get a new sport. Right.
Yeah.
And then finally, after 20 minutes, you are in auto mode. And so then I'm like, okay, fine. Now I can do other things, enjoy it. And at the end, like we said, nothing great comes easy, and being dedicated and disciplined will get you to the finish line. Yeah. So I told you, Bruce, this was going to go fast. It did. This is the end of our time, but I'm putting in the chat right now in the comments, connect with Bruce Campelia and his Light Passers Chronicles book series. The first book is Quest of the Chosen. The second book that's newly released is Other Light. Take a look. I challenge you to buy the first book, read it. It will set you up for the series, and you'll love it. I highly recommend his book and connecting with him. He's an influencer of the best kind. So how's that? Join us on Thursdays for book talk, talking about book publishing and promotion. It's a LinkedIn audio, 8 p.m. Eastern. And then join us next Saturday. Get your coffee, Now Conversations, and join us as we bring to you great authors with great purpose and great stories to tell. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Bruce.
Thanks,
have a great
Lisa.
weekend.
Thanks so much. Okay.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.